What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Presleevables YouTube channel. But Patrick, the Presleevables, this is not.
No, we're pre-sleeved.
It's like a pre-release. You get it?
Release. Yeah, I got it.
You get it?
Yeah.
This is the Presleevables, brought to you by, of course, Cedric Phillips at Cedric A. Phillips on all the things, and Patrick Sullivan at Basic Mountain on Twitter. We're trying a little something new because conceptually for our show, we are essentially doing set reviews on the Presleevables, but many moons later. So we figured, what if we did set reviews before the set basically even comes out, and then we have the ability, assuming we continue to do this thing forever and ever, to see on the Presleevables for this set how it went on the Presleevables for this set.
Really easy to play Monday morning quarterback. Once you know everything, then you know it, and you can talk about it from that framework. Making predictions and guesses and sort of talking about things we like or don't like before seeing the cards in action, that's a different dimension of this. And also, as you mentioned, it means 20 years from now we can go back and point and laugh. So
it's also
there's that too.
Yes, there is. So we are going to be doing a 7-day breakdown of this set. There's going to be a new episode over the course of 7 days. Today, we're going to start with the battles. Tomorrow, we're going to do the white cards. The next day, we'll do the blue cards. Then we'll do the black cards. Then we'll do the red cards. Then we'll do the green cards. And then we'll finalize things and wrap it all up with the multicolored cards, of which there are many here in March of the Machine. Patrick, there's a lot going on in this set, introducing a new card type. We're doing these team-ups of characters from new sets. It's a wild swing that they're taking here.
I really appreciate what I've seen in the set. And that's not to say anything about where the power level is or what standard looks like, not speaking about it through that lens, but just the emphasis on flavor. There's a lot of clean and evocative cards. I think the battle stuff is genuinely cool and a good mechanic. We'll get into that in a little bit. So I really like what's going on here at a top level, and hopefully the cards end up playing well. That's all you can ask for after a certain point.
Yeah, we have no idea if battles are going to play well, but we have our ideas on exactly how battles are going to go. But before we even get into battles and what we think about them, they need to be explained because it's a brand new card type, and Magic hasn't seen a brand new card type in quite a while. So instead of us doing it, we're going to let our friends at Wizards of the Coast do it with their Battle Mechanic Spotlight video right now.
Takes to defeat it. Let's break it all down. Battles can be attacked, but you're not playing battles to defend them. You want to take them out. As a battle enters the battlefield, you choose an opponent to be its protector. A battle's protector can block creatures that are attacking that battle. Every other player, including the battle's controller, can attack it. Battles can be damaged. I mean, why attack battles if you can't damage them, right? Damage dealt to a battle causes that many defense counters to be removed from it. But it's not only combat damage. Some spells will specifically say that they damage battles. Also, any spell or ability that says any target, such as Stoke the Flames, can target a battle. Excellent work! That leads us to battles can be defeated. At least you hope so. Once a battle has no defense counters on it, an ability triggers that exiles it, and then you cast the back face without paying its mana cost. And there won't be a mana cost, so that part should be easy to remember. The back faces of battles include key parts of each plane's defense strategy. Sure, smash everything. That's strategy, yeah. And that's how the battle lines have been drawn in March of the Machine. Small rewards lead to big rewards, if you're prepared to fight for them.
Thank you very much for the fantastic explanation. If you didn't understand battles before, I'm sure you have a better understanding of them now. But Patrick, as someone who has worked on many a game and has designed things for Wizards of the Coast even, what the heck is going on with these cards? Why do they even exist? And are they a good thing?
I think these are going to play pretty well. Now, the individual designs matter a lot, and which are the most powerful ones are going to define a lot of the experience going forward. But just talking about the mechanic at the top level, the most obvious comparison is a Planeswalker.
Okay.
It is something that involves creature combat typically to get it off of the battlefield. And it's typically mentioned that one of the benefits of Planeswalkers is that it generally encourages more creatures. That because they can be attacked, you want to be able to attack your opponent's Planeswalkers. You want to play with blockers to protect your own Planeswalkers. That is true some of the time, but we know it's not true all of the time.
Yep.
Certainly, Planeswalkers have had a very successful history showing up in creature light and creatureless strategies. Battle, I think, more effectively incentivizes the correct thing, because you have to play with creatures to get to the other side, or burn spells or something.
Yep.
You can't cheat the system. It's not Jace the Mind Sculptor on an empty board and then just run away with the game. You actually need to do the thing. And because there's the threat of your opponent doing the thing, it encourages creatures sort of generally on the other side, because who knows when your opponent's going to play a battle and then suddenly keeping them off of the of defeating it is now what the game is about. That's all well and good. And like I said, I think it's a much more reliable way of incentivizing creatures, broadly speaking, than we've seen it with Planeswalkers. I also like that these typically accumulate advantages that can be toppled. Compared to Planeswalkers, we do know that play a Planeswalker on an empty board, take it up, draw a card, go back to you, whatever you play, I'm going to kill, and this is going to just be the snowballing advantage.
And it's been that play pattern for years.
Yeah, we're all familiar with it. These don't really do that, because at the end of the day, the only thing that you're getting after the fact is a card that your opponent can destroy or block or may not even be relevant. It's not hitting the button every single turn.
Yep.
So it much more naturally hems in what the top of the range looks like, and means that even if you get behind, yeah, your opponent gets some stuff. They're ahead. It's not bad for them, certainly, but there is hope of you being able to come back.
Sure.
Which is commonly not the case with Planeswalkers. If I had a critique of the mechanic, and I wouldn't even call this a critique, but I think it will be a reality of playing with these cards, is something that is nice about Planeswalkers is they introduce tactical combat decisions, because getting Planeswalkers down to particular loyalty thresholds is a relevant thing.
Sure. Okay.
If I hit your Planeswalker for 1, it goes from 4 to 3, and that means if you want to use your -3 next turn, it's at the expense of the Planeswalker. It's not this all or nothing, either I'm killing it or ignoring it. It does come up in real life that chipping away at a Planeswalker, trying to get the loyalty down over the course of 2 or 3 turns, trying to tactically shut off one of the modes at a particular point, that's really good gameplay that comes up all the time with Planeswalkers. These things, because it's just a binary, either the thing is doing nothing or you've defeated it and turned it over, I think the sort of tactical attacking stuff is not going to come up as frequently with these. It's going to be much more, I know for sure I can get to it, or it's going to be really prohibitive for my opponent to block to prevent it, or I'm ignoring it. And Planeswalkers don't do that very frequently. But like I said, incentivizes creatures, and I think way more reliably than Planeswalkers do, because you're doing the thing. Mm-hmm. You have to be doing the thing. The fact that the advantages can be toppled, stories are really, really good. I'm optimistic about this mechanic. I think there's a lot of design space here, a lot of opportunity for storytelling, and by and large, the designs I've seen here do look pretty solid. There's a few that I'm critical of for various reasons. We can get into them if they happen to come up, but it does seem like a pretty thoughtful set of designs from my eye. 0 games, obviously,
yep.
Which is sort of
kind of the point.
My top level analysis. These seem, by and large, well executed.
So let's talk about what the format of the show is going to be. I've already given you the rundown of what each day is going to be, but I haven't told you the format of the show. So let's start there. I, as most of you guys have probably figured out, am a competitive focused Magic player. Now, there is a million different ways to do set reviews. We see plenty of limited set reviews out there. We see entire set reviews. However you want to do it, that's your thing. The way we're going to do it is a little bit different. I'm going to focus on my top 5 constructed and competitive cards each day. So today, my top 5 constructed and competitive battles. Tomorrow, my top 5 constructed and competitive white cards. I'm going to do a top 5 list from 5, 4, 3, 2 to 1. Patrick is going to do something a little bit different.
I'm going to talk about my favorite designs. Some of that has a little bit to do with power level. If a card is really, really, really strong, that is kind of a strike against, because it ends up showing up a ton and is repetitive and all that kind of stuff. But I want to talk about it more through the lens of, does this celebrate what I believe to be the best things about the mechanic? Or this mechanic, we know it has 1, 2, 3 types of pitfalls, does this card kind of artfully avoid or solve those pitfalls just wrapped up in the design? So you're going to be speaking about it much more through the lens of just raw power level, good in standard, good in pioneer, good in modern, whatever the case may be.
Yep.
We might have some overlap on our lists. Some of the cards that you identify as being really strong, I also might particularly like as designs, but my sort of feedback and lens is going to be a little bit different than yours.
So, 2 top 5 lists from each of us. I'm competitive and constructed focused. He is game design focused, which really does resonate with each of us for how we do the resleevables. So it makes sense here on the pre-sleevables.
Most of preview season for me is people DMing me cards or me DMing cards to other people and just being like, what is this? Come on.
Sure.
So now I get to bring that experience to you, except not really, because I'm going to be talking about the stuff that I really like and not my bottom 5.
Okay, and I guess what could happen is that if there's a card that I like competitively, you can say that design sucks for these reasons, but there's a reason it's a very powerful card.
Oh, yeah. I mean,
that can
there's
happen.
one card on your list, on your top 5, which is probably my least favorite design of the batch of battles. So we'll talk about it.
Now, what that does mean is, 1, we're not going to go over every battle. It also means that 2, for tomorrow, we're not going to go over every single white card because we don't want these episodes to be outrageously long. We want to come in, we want to speak our piece on the cards that we think are good from our top 5 list, then we'll get out. Now, if you have questions on specific cards or want our feedback on them, that's what the YouTube comments are for. That's what the Patreon is for. You can you can subscribe, leave comments on our YouTube page, on our Patreon, all that stuff, and we'll answer those questions there as well. But for now, it's top 5 lists, and we are going to start with this guy. Your number 5 card for best design of the battles is
Invasion of Kamigawa.
All right. I get the pleasure of reading all of the cards. Invasion of Kamigawa, 3 and a blue. So 4 mana, battle dash siege. That implies that there's going to be battle dash something else too, I think.
Or maybe other sieges.
Yeah, I'm curious. When Invasion of Kamigawa enters the battlefield, tap target artifact or creature an opponent controls and put a stun counter on it. It has 4, I'm going to call it like battle loyalty. How's that sound?
Durability?
Sure, I like that.
I don't know.
Durability. It has 4 battle counters there. You
Yeah.
need to deal 4 damage to this thing in order to transform it into Rooftop Saboteurs, which is a 2/3 Moon Folk Ninja that has flying. And when Rooftop Saboteurs deals combat damage to a player or a battle, you draw a card. You called it Scroll Thief.
Yeah.
Basically pre-show.
Ophidian, if you want to go even further.
Yes, if you want to go Thieving Magpie. Anyway, tell me why you like this battle.
Very simple, clean design.
Okay.
There's a lot of things that I like about it. First of all, it's really modest. So you've actually got to mean it, because 4 mana to stun something for a turn cycle that's not even particularly good in draft.
Yeah.
So you've actually got to mean it to do the thing. I really appreciate the fact that because the thing is stunned for 2 turns, right? If you play it, stun their thing, then the counter comes off, but it's still tapped, and then the following turn it untaps.
Yep.
What that means is if you're able to play the thing and defeat it in one shot, the creature it transforms to, the Ophidian, they're still down their blocker the following turn.
Sure.
So there is something really tactically satisfying about trying to set up the spot where it's tap your flyer, knock this down all in one shot, transform this. Now, next turn, your thing is still locked down. Now I'm starting to hit with my Ophidian. That's a really good feeling that you don't necessarily have to do to make the card work. You could still space it out over a couple turns. But there is a very light incentive to try to do everything all in one shot.
Sure.
But it's not mandatory for the card to work that way.
Yep.
And, part of my concern, I guess, with battles at a top level is there's a certain amount of how much of this is just kind of doing everything in one shot. There's not really a fight going on. It's not done over several turns. I think in terms of a design that's a little bit front-loaded, that kind of speaks to that experience, this is a really clever design. I think it's going to play well. I think the trying to do everything in one shot but not having to do everything in one shot is a really satisfying thing. And there is something about the, tap your thing, get my Ophidian going. Also, as a last little bit, this stuff, the tap and lock it down for a turn sort of thing, usually stronger if you yourself are attacking on the ground. A thing that I don't really like very much I don't really like the all flyer experience very much. This card plays a little bit there, but the stun kind of speaks to tap your biggest thing and now hit on the ground.
Sure.
Which is a nice thing to try to weave into this play pattern, even though it's not mandatory or obtrusive by any means.
Okay. We're going to go to my number 5 card. Again, I am competitive and constructed focused. And to be clear, constructed, I don't know which constructed format, just constructed card.
Right. You built a deck.
Yeah.
You're trying to win games with a deck that you built. That could mean a lot of things.
I would say that it doesn't really weave itself into the commander space because, as you know, not much of a commander player here. Now, with that explanation out of the way, I am going to Invasion of Regatha. Hope I'm pronouncing these cards right. I'm doing the best I can. 2 and a red, Battle Siege. When Invasion of Regatha enters the battlefield, it deals 4 damage to another target battle or opponent, and 1 damage to up to 1 target creature. It's got they call it defense here on Scryfall.
Okay, cool.
It's got a defense 5. 5 battle counters. When you transform this thing, you deal this thing 5 damage. It transforms into Disciples of the Inferno. That's a 4/4 human monk. It's got prowess. Prowess, of course, is whenever you cast a non-creature spell, that creature gets +1/+1 until end of turn. And then if a non-creature source that you control would deal damage to a creature, battle, or opponent, it deals that much damage +2 instead. So the reasons I like this card is mostly for the front half, okay? Because we have seen in constructed formats that sometimes you just want to play a red card that just deals 4 damage for 3 mana. Now this one, of course, cannot deal 4 damage for 3 mana to a creature or a planeswalker, but there are times when you want a card like, the first card that comes to mind is Flames of the Bloodhand. And as a red player yourself, I'm sure you've played with some pretty unique ways of just for you.
Yes.
Yeah.
Unique and bad.
Yes. Now, the fact that this also deals 1 damage to up to 1 target creature could come up. There could be some little bozos lying around that you get the opportunity to finish off. Maybe your turn is attack with all of my knuckleheads, some damage, some blocks take place, and then you finish off the turn by playing this battle, deal 4 to you, deal 1 to your creature that has X damage on it to finish it off, great. And then if you ever get the opportunity to transform this thing, fine. I'm mostly focusing on the front half from a competitive standpoint of just 3 mana, deal 4, and then there's some upside if you get the opportunity to transform it into Disciples of the Inferno.
Yeah, coming up with 5 damage is not a trivial thing.
Yeah.
But what I do like about this card is the Disciples of the Inferno let you go way over the top.
Yes.
There's some spots where, your opponents gain, let's say, 5 or 10 life over the course of the game, and it's like, well, I can kind of get him down to 12, but I'm not going to be able to burn him out from here. And having an option where it's like, okay, knock that thing down, and now everything in my hand is like Furnace of Wrath, and also a prowess creature is a pretty sick out to have in that kind of spot.
Yeah, I think that there might be a little something here. Again, this is number 5 for me, so I'm sure that you could put other battles into the 5th slot here, maybe an honorable mention type of thing. But at the end of the day, I do think that something like a deal 4 can be good. And red decks, for you standard fans out there, do need a little bit of help in the power level department, and maybe this starts to edge it in that direction. But there are plenty of good red cards in this set that also give it the nudge that it's been looking for, and perhaps this is one of them.
Yeah, it's hard to guess too precisely this ahead of time, and so much of this metagame stuff and what's dealing 1 to a creature worth, is that particularly good or bad right now? But there is a lot to like just in this is what you get face up just for 3 mana, and there's some edge cases where transforming the thing is going to be really good.
All right, we're going to your number 4 battle from a game design perspective, and it is
Invasion of Eldraine.
All right, so this is 3 and a black, 4 total mana. When Invasion of Eldraine enters the battlefield, target opponent discards 2 cards. It's got a defensive 4, and when you deal this thing 4 damage, it will transform into Prickle Fairies, which is a 2/2 fairy, which of course means it has flying, as most fairies do. At the beginning of each opponent's upkeep, if that player has 2 or fewer cards in hand, Prickle Fairies deals 2 damage to them.
Lot to like here. I think it speaks to the right audience. The person who's in the market for playing with Mind Rots is usually looking to play a longer game. So the idea of Mind Rot you and then use my creatures not to deal damage to you, but to defeat the battle and then transform, that play pattern is going to speak to the people who like making their opponent discard 2 cards to begin with. I also like that this thing is very much not about running downhill. The risk that some battle designs have, both as a mechanic and some of the designs in this set, a risk that they have is it's just like, all right, well, I'm ahead now, play this, do something, knock it out, get the thing, and now I'm really, really snowballing my advantages.
Okay.
This one is very much not that. It's about extending the game. It's not about winning the game inside of 1 or 2 turns. And then lastly, I think the creature that it transforms into, the prickle fairies.
Yep.
This is a really sharp design for what it's trying to do. One is, I like giving someone just a creature with this design. The people who like to play with mind rots are really sensitive to counting up how many cards am I up over the course of the game. So giving them the 3-for-1 experience is something they're very much in the market for. And then also, it's possible that you may want to time the transform tactically, not just doing it as soon as possible, because I want to keep chipping away at their hand and getting the removal spells out of there. I want to make sure that I at least get 1 trigger off of this thing. So I'm going to wait until your hand size is reduced, et cetera, et cetera. I think there's a lot of opportunity for really satisfying tactical play with this card. And again, very simple. I mean, this is about as simple as it gets. It's completely unobtrusive on the board. It's just discard 2 and now it's just a block
It's
of
just
4.
over
There's
here.
nothing there.
Yeah.
Even if you lose track of it, it's probably not going to be that damaging to your gameplay experience. And I think the card is going to play really well broadly and specifically be very satisfying to the type of people who like to play with these like mind rots and things like that.
Not overpowered in any real meaningful way.
Not a constructed player.
Nope.
It's possible this is not even particularly good in draft, depending on how fast the format is. But I think this is a very well crafted design.
Got it. I'm going to go to my number 4 design, which is Invasion of, I'm going to go with Archvios.
Okay.
3 UU. So 5 total mana. When Invasion of Archvios, I'm trying, enters the battlefield, search your library, graveyard, and or outside the game for an instant or sorcery card you own, reveal it, and put it into your hand. If you search your library this way, shuffle your library. Fine. Defense of 7, which is a ton, and it transforms into Invocation of the Founders. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell from your hand, you may copy that spell. You may choose new targets for the copy. So, with the battles that I'm going over on my list, for the most part, I'm focusing on the front half, not so much the back half. Given that this thing has 7 defense, the kind of decks that are going to play this card, I do not think are going to be dealing 7 damage to this. The reason that this card's interesting to me is this feels like a type of combo card, right? So the first card that came to mind to me, even though I don't think it's an exact parallel, is Dark Petition, which is kind of like a 5 mana. Dark Petition obviously gives you a little bit of the kickback of 3 black if you have spell mastery, that sort of thing. But it's just kind of like an expensive tutor that gets you the thing that you need when you're going off to finish the game. This feels similar. The fact that it's blue, how much does that matter? I don't know. The first thing that comes to mind is like Force of Will, Force Negation, whatever. The fact that it's a siege and not a spell means that it's not going to be reduced by a card like Goblin Electromancer or Brawl. But it does search not only your library, but also your graveyard or outside the game. So there's a lot of flexibility here. Now, again, if you transform this thing into Invocation of the Founders, you probably win. I don't know how you're dealing 7 damage to this, or even if you want to be dealing 7 damage to this. I think that's an entirely different conversation. But there's a lot of flexibility in this card, in my opinion. And I don't really have any idea what a deck looks like that contains this card. It is just, it reads powerful because you get to search so many different zones for the card that you need to win the game.
And this almost made my list of top 5 designs. It was one of the later cuts. What I appreciate about this is it is not really leaning into the creature experience. As you mentioned, most of the raid is just nested in the ability to wish.
Yeah.
Maybe on the edges you want to flip it sometimes, or maybe there's some matchups where that's the thing that you're doing, or maybe your deck's really geared towards attacking. Doesn't seem likely, but maybe that's part of the range. That instead of just saying, no, we're not going to do that sort of thing, the battles are about creatures and creature combat and all that. It's like, just make this one a little bit more modest, but let people have the fun of wishing for anything that they want. And I don't know, these Storm decks play with Empty the Warren sometimes. It's not unthinkable to me that this could come up on the edges, that you would actually transform the thing. Short grape shots, like, they're,
Yeah.
stranger things have showed up in these style of decks. So I think there's possibility for that backside to be a little bit better than we're giving it credit for. And I think a 5 mana wish is just a fun thing to be thinking about.
Again, it's the kind of card that is on my list because there is the potential for it to be like a 1 or a 2 of in these style of decks. And then who knows? Who knows what it ends up looking like? So that's number 4 for me. Now we're going to number 3 for you, which is
Invasion of Belanon.
All right, let's take a look-ski here. I got 2 and a white, so 3 total mana. When Invasion of Belanon enters the battlefield, create a 2/2 white and blue knight creature token with vigilance. Okay, 3 mana for a 2/2. Not the best deal we've ever seen. Defensive 5, but when we flip this thing, creatures you control get +1/+1, which is Belanon War Anthem, aka Glorious Anthem.
Yes.
All right, let's talk about it.
I don't think this one's particularly strong. Maybe it's good in limited formats. I'd be surprised if it showed up much in constructed. Very simple, clean, evocative story. You can tell what's going on. It makes a lot of sense that when you've successfully defeated a battle, won a battle, you get a glorious anthem. That's like an easy story to tell.
Sure.
So even if you're, maybe some of these stories are a little bit more of an abstraction or it's just sort of mechanical, this one, for as simple as it is pretty evocative. I also like that it goes after the right people because, you get a creature to go along with it. That naturally speaks to battling and trying to take this thing down. But if you are forced to attack into an opponent with creatures, you might lose some creatures along the way. It naturally suppresses the value of the Glorious Anthem. If your opponent's sitting around not blocking, not doing anything, this flips over real fast.
Yep.
And you keep all of your creatures along the way too. So very evocative, great story, will play well, and also to the extent that it's powerful, I think it's going after the right people.
Okay.
Great.
So, just kind of straightforward.
Clean design, plays well, and even though it's really simple, I think there's just a lot of like really good play to, all right, the specific numbers on your creatures, the keywords that you have really matter for what this card transforms into. So while you're attacking and while I'm blocking, I'm making decisions that are not just the same game after game. Sometimes it's like, okay, well, you're going to get the Glorious Anthem no matter what, so I really need to put a premium on your flying creatures because maybe I can muck up the ground afterwards, but your flying creatures are going to be really problematic or whatever. There's all variations of that sort of thing. And it happens to come along with a token that has Vigilance.
Yeah.
Vigilance is a thing that you will care more or less about in certain games, depending on what cards you have and what the circumstances are.
Yep.
So I think it's going to, again, this is one that I think is going to play really, really well on top of it being really clean and evocative.
That's his number 3. We're going to go to my number 3 now, which is Invasion. I want to make sure I got this right. Invasion of Innistrad is number 3 for me. That's correct. All right. It's a black one. It costs 2 BB, so 4 total mana. It has Flash. And when Invasion of Innistrad enters the battlefield, target creature an opponent controls gets -13 till end of turn. We're playing into those Innistrad vibes of the number 13 and all the gothic stuff there. So from a design standpoint, that's pretty cool to me. Defensive 5, and it'll transform into an enchantment named Deluge of the Dead. When Deluge of the Dead enters the battlefield, create 2/2/2 black zombie creature tokens. You can also activate this for 2 and a B, so 3 total mana. Exile target creature from a graveyard, If it was a creature card, create a 2/2 black zombie creature token. So, competitive set, first thing I thought about with this card, once again, I know it's not an exact parallel, but I'm thinking about a 4 mana removal spell that was black based that saw play in standard. So I first thought of Vraska's Contempt.
Sure.
Okay. Vraska's Contempt, of course, gains life, immediately kills something, whatever. This one is going to kill whatever it is a very high percentage of the time, given -13. And then you get this sub game that you get to play of, do I want to transform this thing? Because when you do, getting 2/2/2s isn't a bad deal, but also this exile effect from the graveyard that can play in a longer game also seems somewhat powerful. And then you're also generating more creatures as well. So there are going to be definitely times where you want to manage someone's graveyard. If you've been playing the standard format, of course, you know about cards like Corpse Appraiser, Graveyard Trespasser, and just kind of managing what's going on in graveyards. The Cruelty of Gix, bringing something back, whatever. And plenty of constructed formats have plenty of graveyard interactions where you want to manage the graveyard. Great. Do I think this is a card that sees 4 ofs? No. Do I think this is a card that maybe sees a 1 or a 2 of when you're like, hey, I need another removal spell that's not conditional but gets the job done every single time, or there's something particular going on in the format that I want a -13? Sure. And so much like the last battle I went over, the blue one that searches for cards outside of the game, this one again strikes me as maybe a 1 of, maybe a 2 of, format depending, but it does have some applications, and transforming this one is clearly easier than the last one given the defensive 5 as opposed to 7, and it will come up some number of the time, I believe.
I am optimistic about this one, but I do agree with your sort of qualifier that it's more of a 1 or 2 of. This thing is really mana intensive, and the second copy is so much weaker than the first copy. But yeah, like you said, I think there's a lot about the if you're in the market for 4 mana -13, which is a card you would play some amount of the time, then you're really doing it because you get all the extra leftover stuff here. Mm-hmm. And also the fact that it's flash is like not a small part of this. Playing around this card, if you're something that you're concerned about, it's like, what do? Do you just like not attack at all? You leave one thing back and it's like, okay, kill that, untap, knock the thing out, transform, 2 more things, and now I have this huge late game advantage.
Sure.
So if you're, I think that the flash part of this is really interesting, both in terms of giving it enough rate to get over, and also because this is a really challenging card to play around because it has flash and the battle numbers are so specific.
Now, as I said at the top, we're not really doing a limited analysis towards anything, but what I will say is this card's probably really good and limited.
Yeah, that's a format where you pay 4 mana for -13 and at instant speed, and then knock out, flip. This thing is sick when it's flipped.
You get 2/2/2s, you're exiling their stuff. Obviously, creatures trade in limited quite a bit more than they do in constructed, generating more stuff that way. So I imagine it's probably pretty good in that format. All right, so now we're moving on to, we're going through this pretty quickly, I will say. We're moving on to number 2, your runner-up for best design of the battles.
Invasion of Tarkir. Love this one.
All right, one in a red. Battle Siege, just like all the other ones. When Invasion of Tarkir enters the battlefield, reveal any number of dragon cards from your hand. When you do, Invasion of Tarkir deals X plus 2 damage to any other target, where X is the number of cards revealed this way, so it can't deal it to itself. This is going to transform into Defiant Thundermaw. Hang on, defensive 5. Now transforms into Defiant Thundermaw, which is a 4/4 dragon, flying trample. Whenever a dragon you control attacks, it deals 2 damage to any target. So that's creature, that's battle, that's planeswalker, that's player. Why do we like this one?
So very much not about running downhill. It has 5 defense. So it's not like play this and do everything in one shot is really the thing that's going on here. It requires some setup, or the game has to have gone on for some amount of time to set up, to engineer that kind of spot. It is deck specific without being overly prescriptive. Yes, it's better for dragons. You probably want to be playing with some number of them, but you can just play the card for what it is if you're able to attack or deal damage reliably, or there's just a lot of 2 toughness creatures floating around. You could do it, but you probably want to play with some dragons, but it doesn't scale all the way up. It's not an indefinite scaler. So there is a line where you're not getting that much extra for each extra dragon. And I like cards that kind of scale in that way. Story's great. I also really like the fact that it deals 2 plus N, and then the creature on the backside deals 2. So 1, it's a little bit easier from a tracking perspective, and 2, it's telling a story of like, that dragon's there the whole time. Do you have other friends you're bringing to the party?
Sure. Okay.
Lastly, last little bit on this one is, in red in particular, I like giving some nudge towards, oh yeah, knocking this thing out at the end of your opponent's turn is sweet. If you got a shock, you just like sort of surprise get it. It's really awesome. And something with an attack trigger, but without haste, is a really cool thing to surprise your opponent with. So, okay. You don't, a little of that goes a long way. And I'm not saying that it's really going to show up in constructed very much because of that. But on the red cards in particular, I like giving a little bit of just wait if it comes up, going to be awesome.
Sure. Okay.
And the design on the back is a really good, that's a good one to surprise your opponent with. Yeah. They're not seeing that one coming. They might get in a lot of trouble.
Okay. With these battles, before I get to my number 2, so the defense here is 5.
Yeah.
Clearly, there's some knob turning going on here, because if it were 3, it'd be way too good. Yeah. If it's 4, I don't know if it's way too good. So how do you think these things got priced to the best of your ability? Because I imagine they probably erred on the side of caution, which was just like, if we think it's too good, let's just add another defense to it, which is probably the correct thing to do.
I think a lot of it, to me, if I was playtesting with these things, would just be like, the experience of play this and do everything in one turn is pretty corny. Okay. A lot of where the fun comes from is the set it up, now there's a mini game going on, or I kind of had to set this thing up over the course of several turns to do it all in one shot, so there was sort of some implicit counterplay. So there's a couple ways that you can manage that. Mana cost, that's a huge part of it. And defense, that's a huge part of it as well. But also a lot of it is the output on the front half giving you an advantage for being already running downhill a little bit. The design that I like here the least, and I think it's your number 2, so we'll be getting to it in a moment, is kind of like it's a mix of all of the worst stuff from my perspective.
Okay.
There's a lot of ways to balance these things, and I think there's an importance for the cards to be sort of different inside of the color. Like my default would be, okay, well, if we don't have a 4-mana one, let's turn this one into 4 mana and adjust the number. Okay, we have a bunch of ones that have 4 defense. Can we turn this one up to 5 if we want this one to be a little bit stronger? And it makes it different from the other ones. So to me, it's the sum of all the parts. It's not just one piece of it, but it's the, am I just having the experience of playing this, knocking it down very early on in the game or very simply? And if that's going on, that's not great. That's not what's fun about this. If it comes up some of the time, that's okay. But like that shouldn't be what the experience is. And then just toggle the text boxes and the numbers accordingly until you get to the right distribution of stuff.
Okay. Well, I think we're going towards the one you like the least.
Yeah.
Which is Invasion of Gabakhan. 1 and a white. When Invasion of Gabakhan enters the battlefield, look at target opponent's hand. You may exile a non-land card from it. For as long as that card remains exiled, its owner may play it. A spell cast this way costs 2 more to cast. Easiest way to think about this is Elite Spellbinder, Polo Vito Domidarosa's invitational card, which has essentially the same effect with a 3/1 flyer tacked onto it. Okay. This thing's only got 3 defense, so I think this is the lowest defense card that we've gone over today. And it transforms into Light Shield Array. At the beginning of your end step, put a +1/+1 counter on each creature that attacked this turn. You can sacrifice Light Shield Array. Creatures you control gain hexproof and indestructible until end of turn. So, not only do you get to take a look at your opponent's hand, I don't want to say take their best card, but take their most meaningful card, depending on what's going on in your hand. Get it out of here, make it cost 2 more, get you some information on exactly what they're up to, plan out your turns, whatever. The defense on this is rather low for an aggressive white-based strategy. And then this transforms into effectively a Glorious Anthem, but a different kind because you're getting permanent +1/+1 counters that stack. And you also get to defend your creatures by sacrificing Light Shield Array to give hexproof and indestructible into a turn. There's a lot of power in this card, I think.
Yeah, this is of all the cards, I know it's not your number 1, but this was the most concerning of the designs to me. Maybe on rate, I didn't think about would I rank this number 1, but it would be certainly in my top 5, no doubt about it. But I think that this one's like genuinely worrisome to me.
Okay, why are we worried?
Okay, so what are the pitfalls with battle? Advantage for running downhill. Potentially a critique could be very swingy based on play draw.
Yep.
And is it just more leverage for the person who's already generating leverage? And this has all that in spades.
Okay.
So first of all, this seems extremely play draw dependent. So much stronger if you're going first.
Sure.
It's also 2 mana and doesn't have that much battle. So it could be, or defense rather, excuse me. So it's not that hard to be knocking this thing over on turn 3 or even like turn 2 with some of the right draws. And then the advantages that it gives you are in the front, on the front side, really biased towards opening hand going first. Okay. This thing on turn 6 is like, whatever, I got 2 to play or I don't have anything left in my hand. On turn 2, this is like a Thoughtseize.
Yeah, okay. Sure.
And then the back side is, okay, so everything that just attacked, that gets a +1/+1 counter. And what do you think next turn is going to look like? It's just, I'm going to be attacking with the same stuff over and over again. And then also, even if you have the ability to catch up with the sweeper, I have indestructible and hexproof on my team, like just ready to go.
Whenever I want it. Yeah.
So a lot of when I spoke at the beginning of just what's nice about these compared to Planeswalkers is there's no recurring advantage. You can topple what your opponent's done. You can catch back up. This is the design where I think that's least the case. It's just more of the same. It's only getting worse. Their creatures get to a certain size. You don't even need to sacrifice it to give it hexproof or indestructible because nothing can kill it
sure.
at a certain point.
Okay.
Very front-loaded, very much about going first, very much about the game's kind of over before the game got started. That's not to say that I think this is necessarily going to be like a 4-7 standard, and it depends on the exact texture of the format and all that kind of stuff. But My guess is if any of these go wrong, this is the one.
Yeah, when I'm thinking about this kind of card, I'm thinking about play pattern, much like what you're describing. And this strikes me very much as a turn 3 or turn 4 play. Doesn't mean you won't cast it on turn 2, but you can imagine a world, right, where you just go like, okay, turn 1, 2-1. Turn 2, I don't know, another 2-1, or like, something that costs 2 that's maybe a 3-3 power. Okay, great. And then on turn 3, like, I play this, look at your hand, I take your best card. Again, assuming I'm on the play, use my 3-power creature to ding this. My 2-power creature attacks you. Great, this transforms. My bozos get bigger. They're defended. I know what's in your hand. Your best card you can't cast. And that's a lot.
This is so much about do everything in one shot.
Yeah.
Play this, knock it out, and now your best card's gone. All my stuff's bigger, and the enchantment sacrifice probably covers your second best card.
Yeah.
Or your best card.
Yep. Yeah.
Just say this one is, and I call this out as the exception rather than the rule. Like I said, I think by and large this is a really well crafted set of designs. And there's, from my perspective, some thoughtfulness about how do we toggle various things and what are we trying to get out of this experience? What is the play pattern we're trying to engender? And this one seems really good and very much the wrong way. But, this prediction maybe this is much ado about nothing and I look silly, but
Also strikes me as a card that's pretty good in multiples.
oh yeah.
Yeah.
This one stacks really nice.
Yeah. This one strikes me as a good multiple.
Best card. Now's your third best card.
Yeah.
And also all the attacking bonuses, those stack.
Yeah.
And then I also can maybe sacrifice one of them to fizzle your terror because I still have the second copy to cover your wrath.
Sweep or whatever, yeah. Yeah, this one. Maybe this should have been number 1 for me. I like my number 1 pick still quite a bit. We're going to get to that in a minute, but first we're going to get to your number 1. Your vote for best design battle.
Invasion of Ixalan.
All right. 1 and a green, so 2 mana. When Invasion of Ixalan enters the battlefield, look at the top 5 cards of your library. You may reveal a permanent card from among them and put it in your hand. Put the rest of them at the bottom of your library in a random order. It'll transform into Belligerent Regisaur, which is a 4/3 trample. When you cast a spell, Belligerent Regisaur gains indestructible until end of turn.
So story is really great. I like the idea of sort of scouting out a new environment, and then it turns out there's dinosaurs there.
Okay.
That's really sweet.
Okay.
There's a little bit of that going on. I do like that you can just sort of play the thing for what it is. But often decks that are in the market for this sort of thing just sit around, do nothing, just generate mana, just assemble permanents, like whatever the case may be. Giving them a nod towards attacking early or dealing damage just moves the needle just ever so slightly in the right direction. It only takes a little bit in terms of incentives where it's like, okay, well, I would have just played one more rampant growth, but instead I'll play this 4/4 for 4 because the 4/4 for 4 is good for whatever reason. And also I'm playing with Invasion of Ixalan, so being able to attack for 4 is something I'm in the market for too. Just moves the incentives really nicely in a subtle way. And then I really like the backside. It's just like an appealing thing. Wow, this is so much for 2 mana, which is, all the front half is. Feels free even though it's very much not. I like calling out 1, casting a spell, because so many of these decks that are in the market for this are they just permanents. So saying explicitly, play with another card type that's not the thing that we're paying you out for in the front. That's great. I also like the trigger of gains indestructible because these decks don't often play with spells, but they specifically don't play with a lot of instants because so much of what they're doing is just accumulating resources on their own turn, moving their permanents around, drawing cards in bulk. And giving something indestructible is way, way better on an instant than a sorcery. One, because of just the information and also being able to do stuff against your opponent's sweepers. So this one really simple, really clean. And what I like about this design so much is there's a lot of ways to do the look at some cards, get a permanent, draw an extra card, the smoothing out variant stuff. That is kind of boring and repetitive. Weaving it into this little sub game where it's not like the game is decided by whether or not I can get to this thing or not, but it does pay me out for playing with some creatures that can brawl, and sometimes it's an interesting little sub game that can come up, but not always. That's a lot of really good stuff.
Okay. I like the feel of this because it feels very much like Ixalan.
Yeah,
that's the thing I like about this the most. Of course, the art tells a great story, and the fact that this transforms into a dinosaur tells a great story, all of that stuff. But this feels very much like a card that you would find on Ixalan.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that part of it is really cool. My final card, speaking of cards that you're going to find on their particular plane or their home or what have you, Invasion of Kaldheim is my last one. My number one stunner. 3 in a red, so 4 total mana. When Invasion of Kaldheim enters the battlefield, exile all cards from your hand, then draw that many cards. Until the end of your next turn, you may play cards exiled this way. So what this means, first and foremost, is that the cards you exile from your hand, you get access to later.
Right.
Okay? Because you're exiling those cards, then you draw that many cards. So if I have 4 cards in my hand, I play this, I exile those, I draw 4 cards. Great. Until the end of, not this turn, until the end of your next turn. So think Light Up the Stage or other similar effects. You may play cards exiled this way, which means maybe those cards you want to play, maybe there's a land in there, maybe those cards all stink, you're glad you've gotten rid of them, whatever the case may be. Okay. Defense of 4, and this is going to transform into Pyre of the World Tree. Pyre of the World Tree says discard a land card. Okay. Pyre of the World Tree deals 2 damage to any target. Whenever you discard a land card, exile the top card of your library, you may play that card this turn. A little bit of Seismic Assault vibes here, of course, given the discard a land card, deal 2 damage to any target. You can deal to a creature, a planeswalker, a battle, a person, whatever. But also it pays you off for discarding a land card right in the second line of text, which is whenever you discard a land card, exile the top card of your library. You may play that card this turn. The first card that jumped to mind when I saw this card was Experimental Frenzy.
Yeah.
Just kind of a way to play into a longer game with red, which we have seen with Experimental Frenzy in the past. Gives your red deck some staying power. Could be a sideboard card, could be a main deck card. With Experimental Frenzy, that was like a main deck 4 of.
Yeah.
Right? And then, over time it moved into sideboards in and out. Red decks were kind of based around it. And I don't remember if we were covering matches at that time, but I remember many experience of they drew Experimental Frenzy, they're going to go nuts. But also it would go wrong sometimes as well. So it wasn't just Experimental Frenzy game over. Sometimes it was, this is awkward thing to sacrifice their experimental frenzy now, which I think is the hallmark of a really well-designed card. And this feels similar, but I do think the ceiling on this card is pretty high for a couple of reasons. Most notably, that defensive 4 for a red deck is very obtainable.
I mean, that's the magic number.
Yeah.
Because of Stoke the Flames.
Yep.
And this is the type of card that there's just a lot of Stoke the Flames vibes to it. Like drawing a bunch of extra cards and not necessarily attacking with my creatures very aggressively and having stuff that's left over kind of lingering around.
Mm-hmm.
And this card is super sick to play. It also can find you Stoke or the random goblin tokens, whatever you need to do to convoke the thing.
You could also play it and Stoke's already in your hand. You exile that, and then on your turn you untap, blow it up, play your game.
That's such a sick one too, because one, you're just up all these cards just from doing the thing. And then if your opponent can't interact with the back half, then you're just going off.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
This seems powerful. Now, given your little breakdown of Invasion of Galbakan, I think it's close between which one of these cards are better. Now, Invasion of Galbakan, I think, is more powerful, and I think it's going to give the injection to white-based strategies that are more aggressive, that Standard's looking for and potentially other formats are looking for. I think of, when I thought of Invasion of Kaldheim as a number 1 card, I was thinking of the red decks that are in Standard currently. And again, we're not just talking Standard, but I am for the sake of this conversation. They were missing a little something. They need a little bit of help and an injection. And I think this might be an injection that they were looking for to make them into more viable decks, because they couldn't go into the late game against, Shieldred or anything like that.
Yeah. And this is a card that even if your opponent had something like that, you can play so far over the top.
Yes.
That even if you don't have a direct way of answering it, you just figure it out because you're up a million cards. The faucet never gets turned off.
Yeah.
So, yeah. I mean, this plus Stoke to me is, again, some of it depends on what the token making is. Cheap creatures are like, I'm not hand waving all of that, but that's a really appealing 1-2 combination to try to build around, I think.
Yeah. So that's my number 1. And your number 1, of course, was Invasion of Ixalan. And my thoughts on battles are, boy, they're different. They're just these are the kind of cards, and this is what I love about Magic, almost 30 years into this game for myself, even though I know we're working in the 30th anniversary. What I love about this game is they found a way to introduce a new card type. I don't really know how they're going to play.
Yeah.
I don't know how good they are, but they are interesting to read. They want you to complete a thing. you're going to feel good about completing the thing. And then it's just a question of like, where do we go from here? How good is completing the thing? We don't know.
You tapped on it right there. The sort of unlimited well of design of just like, how can we just get people their dopamine nonstop?
Yes.
Like, what's the thing? And it's giving people mini quests that they can complete but still lose the game.
Yep.
Having the moment where like, yep, I defeated the battle. I set it up somehow. Now I get like the Sarah Angel, who really cares, but like I did it. It feels good.
Yeah.
Some amount of the time it actually is powerful. That's the stuff that people keep like, I mean, that's to me some of the most fundamental stuff about game design is like, how do you make the game fun for the person who is losing?
Sure.
It's easy to have fun when you're winning. We
Yep.
like that experience, right? How do we make the game fun for someone who's losing? And a lot of that is, well, we see little mini quests along the way where even if you ultimately lost the game, you had a moment of feeling really good or having unlocked an achievement. And these cards do that really, really well.
Yeah. I'm very excited to see how these are going to play. I do think that they're going to be a hit and limited. They could just incentivize that kind of gameplay. Some are clearly going to be better than others. I'm sure there's a busted one or two of them out there that are like outrageously good and limited, what have you. But to see these kind of show up and constructed, those mini games that you mentioned, I think that's going to be really, really fun. Again, completing the quest, completing the task, and still losing the game. For me, what's also going to be unique is when you play against your first battle and constructed. It's like, how does the opponent react? Does the opponent go like, "Oh, I got to not let this happen," or they're like, "I don't care," and then they're wrong. The first thing I think about right now is the first time I played against 3-mana Teferi.
Yeah.
And my opponent, like, I think they plussed it. Maybe they bounced something. I don't remember. But I was basically just like, doesn't really matter. Like, attack you. And then I definitely lost for doing that. And now that experience isn't the exact same thing here because Teferi Time Raffler is a lot less fun and a lot more impactful on, like, you didn't kill it, you lose now, whatever. But the experience that I had there was, I've never played against this card before. I don't know if I'm supposed to kill this or not. That's what I think the battle thing is going to be. But on the opposite end of, am I supposed to care about this? What are they up to with the other side of this thing? I have no idea.
A big thing about what you touched on is that the floor is so high. Like Teferi is just like, yeah, I get my money back, draw a card, you're down some mana, maybe we're even on mana.
Yeah.
That's the worst case scenario.
Yeah.
And oftentimes it's much better than that.
Yes.
A lot of these cards are like, no, there's a real downside here. You would not play with these cards unless you were interested in the sum of everything.
Mm-hmm.
I think the one that you called out earlier, the 3 deal 4, that's one where maybe you're just kind of playing it just face up on rate and the backside doesn't come up all that often. But by and large, the designs we're talking about is like you kind of have to want to do all of it for these cards to be worth considering, even in limited. And that makes them so much different than cards that are just like, yeah, draw a card and trade the mana that you just spent.
I'm very curious to see how these cards are going to play. I'm also very curious to see what your thoughts are on our top 5 list of battles and what are your favorite battles. That's what the YouTube comments are for. So feel free to share your thoughts down yonder on our top 5 list, your favorite battles, and perhaps you want to hear our thoughts on what your favorite battles are. If you're not already, please do like and subscribe, ring the bell, do all the things that one does on YouTube so we can defeat the algorithm. If you're not a patron already, feel free to sign up on our Patreon over at patreon.com/theresleevables. And when we come back tomorrow, we're going over the white cards, my friend.
There's a lot of cool ones.
There are.
As someone who is a sort of a large white critic of like, who would like this? This isn't fun. None of these cards are cool. Well, I had to make cuts on my top 5.
I did too.
On my top 5 design list. So I'm excited to go over these. And I'm not the one who's just in the habit of gassing up the white cards.
Yeah, that's only my thing as someone who loves a white card. So we'll share our top 5 competitive and best design white cards tomorrow. See you then.